Hello, my name is Janusz Urbanowicz. You can call me Alex because that's the name I use on the internet. I'm from Polish National CERT, CERT.pl, and I will be talking about cyber attack attribution, which was a part of our research that we did for European Union as a part of a project called Cyber Road. I'm supposed to tell you about this project because it's the condition that we got the money for it. It was a project about identifying gaps in research about cybersecurity, and our part was identifying gaps in knowledge about cyber attack attribution, and to do that we had to inventory what we know about attribution. And we work as a team of 4, Piotr Kijewski, head of the CERT.pl, Przemek Jaroszewski, me, and George Armin, which is a security researcher from Europe. Some of you probably know him. And I have a question for you all, folks. Can you give me an example of a cyber terror attack? Can anybody name a cyber terrorist attack? We are all afraid of cyber terrorists. What did they do so we are so afraid? Stuxnet was a government operation, not a terrorist.
I was offering the example of a computer operator hitting the button and saying there's an imminent missile attack aimed at Hawaii.
Okay. Okay, but it's sort of my point that we are very afraid of cyber terrorists, but nobody saw any cyber terrorist attack. Actually, we saw cyber terrorist attack. I think the only organization, or not an organization we can call a cyber terrorist, are the Anonymous, which are not affiliated with any government, and they do things which can be said it is terrorism. And what is the motivation of a cyber terrorist? Cyber terrorist wants to put a message in, as usual terrorists does that too. Terrorist builds a brand and binds his message to this brand, and because of that, he wants to be identified. There are no anonymous terrorist attacks. It is a routine that a bomb somewhere goes off, and then some organization claims the attack. So they want to do it because of political reasons or ideological. In the case of Anonymous, they do it for laws, which is a sort of ideology. They may do it for ethnic reasons, national reasons, or for propaganda. Mostly for propaganda, as cyber terrorism goes, because most of the cyber terrorist activities we observe is sort of terrorist graffiti, as terrorists and sympathizers paint murals with guys with Kalashnikovs on the walls. That's cyber terrorists deface web pages with their logos, and this is propaganda. They, of course, would be happy to be able to attack human lives or state infrastructure, but as we agreed, there was no such an attack yet. We have the cybercrime scope, which is quite simple because those guys do it for money. Their motivation is financial. And I think most of you may know this guy. This is the Zeus guy, Slavic. And with cybercrime, there are two distinct classes of cybercrime. First is classical, I call it classical, old type of crime adapted to the internet. For example, instead of selling somebody the Brooklyn Bridge, I put out an initial coin offering. Or instead of ransom letter from a Spanish prisoner held by pirates, we have the Nigerian scam, which is basically the same, but 300 years later. But this is one class, and the other class is the crime that could be not done without the internet, like banking malware, like ransomware, like jackpotting. Those kinds of attacks are not possible without the internet. And then we have cyber warfare. Somebody said about Stuxnet. I don't consider Stuxnet a cyber-terrorist attack because it was a covert government operation. Actually, an example of what I call a hybrid warfare. It is not an act of war because it is not official act of war. There is no pronouncement of war between two countries, but it is an operation that affects some other country. Also, it's part of what I think NSA calls computer network operations, which is also espionage, sabotage, Stuxnet, or other operations of this kind. And then internet is great as psychological operations theater. We saw that with the last American election. I call this opinion engineering because this goes far farther than propaganda, or what Russians call agitprop, agitation and propaganda. And then there is a question: why should we attribute a cyber attack of aforementioned kind at all? We could just do mitigation, like do the blue team stuff on the network, identify the fake news, and take them down and so on. But why attribute it to somebody? There are very important reasons to do so, and then help us in the mitigations in fighting the attacks. And first, as with any other crime, it is very useful to know what the motivation of the perpetrator is, how he do it, why he does it. I told before, some of them do it for money, some of them do it for the law, some of them do it because they are ordered to for some states-making reason. Another point of attribution is that if we can identify the perpetrator, we can prosecute him, and this is a deterrent. Criminology says that the severity of the punishment is not a deterrent, but the certainty of being prosecuted. If we can identify as many as all or most cyber attackers and prosecute them, it will be a significant crime deterrent. And then, like with this psychological operations, there is a political advantage, there is a political context, and then it helps us to fight the threat, to mitigate the threat, when we know what is the political aim of those that do the psyops, do the propaganda, do some kinds of operation. And then, of course, the defenders have limited resources, and as the old adage goes, the attacker has to win once, the defender has to win every time. So when we know what the attackers want, we can focus our resources on the most crucial part of the defenses and not spread it over when it will be in which case the defense would be too weak. And there is law enforcement context for attribution. As I said, it is needed for prosecuting the attacker. It is needed for identifying the attacker's target in the counterintelligence sense, and then it can be used as performance indicator. For example, in our work in ZPL, from some time we almost don't have any malicious activities bound to Polish national domain, and it is the result of our work. So we know that the bad guys don't use Polish domain because we will take their infrastructure, their domains down. The most important part of modern attribution is that it may lead to a war. The modern present US doctrine says it is reasonable to retaliate with physical force to a cyber attack, and with that one country could even invoke the Article 5 of NATO treaty, so it will be global war because of cyber attacks. So we need to know who did this cyber attack, so to not attack wrong country. And as the organized crime moves to the internet, we need to know their groups, the organizations, and the cartels to coordinate international prosecution. And then we did a SWOT analysis on the problem on attribution from the point of view of the attacker. Those are strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats from the point of view of cybercrime attackers, cyber thief. And if you are familiar with this SWOT analysis, all the factors are split into helpful and harmful, and internal and external. And that gives us strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And for the cyber criminalist, the internet is a very nice place because there are a lot of anonymizing tools, a lot of readily available cybercrime tools. It is easy to plant false evidence. It is easy to frame somebody else. But there is other side to that, because if you use banking malware from GitHub, it probably already is researched, and every antivirus has signatures for that. And there are a lot of routine reactions to popular tools, like if you use Mimikatz, every host endpoint protection software will detect it. So there are tools, but they are not perfect. And the most important weakness is that OPSEC is hard, and for most of the criminals are not very smart, and then they got caught because of their stupidity. We are happy about that, of course. There are a lot of opportunities. I've missed one opportunity in this table, which is the most important, and there is a lot of targets. The cybercriminal has abundance of targets. In military it is called target-rich opportunity. There are thousands of users of internet banks. There are thousands of users of Bitcoin. So if he fails to attack one person, one target, there are another to be attacked. There is a lot of external infrastructure built for cyber criminals, like bulletproof hostings. There are lots of data on how law enforcement and white hats, how they operate. There are a lot of anonymity tools. And what they don't know, but unluckily it is the fact that there is a lot of red tape blocking the prosecution of internet crime. If you want to do an internet crime and not get caught for a long time, spread your infrastructure around the globe. If you have hosting in Mongolia and exploit it from Southern America, it will be very hard to prosecute you. And there are threats to this model of illegal business, which is there are organizations like the companies some of you work for, which business is to disrupt the cybercrime. There are government law enforcement. There are various bulk internet monitoring programs like honeypot networks that detect the cybercriminal cyber attacks. There is a lot of research done on cybercrime tools, and there is one point that is quite hard for the cybercriminal to mitigate, which is I call it offline policing, human intelligence, which is, for example, police or other law enforcement researching the cybercriminals. There are some. I give you an example I heard from a British policeman. There was this guy who was scamming people over the internet, and he was smart because he closed his Facebook profile, and nobody outside of his circle of friends could not see what he posts. But they found him in this way that his Facebook was closed, but his girlfriend's was not. And she posted that they were going to vacation somewhere there and posted photos, and then police went there and arrested the guy. So there is a lot of intelligence or cyber criminals that can be gathered by just walking and asking people and showing them the badge, of course. For cyberterrorism, it is quite similar because, again, it is easy to anonymize one's actions on the internet. It is also easy to do false flags and fake flags. False flag is an operation when I'm doing something and I pretend to be someone else, like I'm American and I pretend to be Israeli. And fake flag is creating a completely new actor out of pure cloth, like, for example, shadow brokers. They're invented by somebody. They are not a real hacking group. They are operating only for some political reason. I don't want to go into it. So it is easy to do it on the internet. It is much easier than do it in the real world. And for the terrorist, as I said before, it is needed to be associated with their actions. There is no terrorist act without a brand of this its creator. And on the internet, it is quite easy to hijack somebody else's operation and claim it's as mine. It is not a good thing when somebody wants to push the message through. And luckily for us, as we are here, to do internet terrorism, it requires high technical skills, and the real terrorists are not that smart. Looking, for example, at the ISIS guys, they were using a very, luckily for us, they were using very weak encryption programs to hide their communications, and that allowed to read their communications. With cyberterrorism, there is the opportunities that there is a weak cooperation of law enforcement around the world. The opportunities are similar to those of cybercrime because the actions are similar. But there is one thread that is missing from the cybercrime model. That is, there is a whole sector of law enforcement that is dedicated to fighting terrorism and cyberterrorism. And then that sector of law enforcement has enacted a whole new chapter of laws that allows for monitoring of the internet and catching terrorists there. And this is what makes a cyber-terrorist job in the long run very much harder. And the last one is cyber warfare, and this is the best of both worlds, and also you get a budget. You get a budget, you get expertise, you get back office support, you get everything you can put your hands on, as long as it fits in your budget, which depends on the target. And for example, you can even have an actual intelligence on how law enforcement work. As for terrorists and criminals go, they are limited only to the open source intelligence on the law enforcement, but cyber soldiers can learn how it is for real and how to avoid them. And that's it. As a cyber warrior, cyber soldier, you sometimes want to be identified, sometimes don't. For example, there is one specific weakness is that some of the cyber warriors, cyber warfare tools are very distinctive. And by using those tools, the cyber warfare operator identifies himself as the member of equation group or the Dukes or some other APT. So this is probably why we are now observing the APTs shifting to the off-the-shelf malware. And with attribution, we need to be aware of traps. Because the subject is political and more political, there is a pressure on attributing given attack, given incident on a political body. But for example, with WannaCry, we don't know if this was a North Korea government operation or this was malware of someone who usually works for North Korea who just wanted to make some money. We don't know that. And we don't have any concrete evidence to verify, independently verify, because all the evidence is mostly secret. We don't know. We are here. Of course, the guys from the FBI or NSA can see the evidence, but we can't. And for the cybercrime, the problem is that if you want to analyze the whole cybercrime, whole network of crime, it is usually equal to investigating the whole group because their operations, their dependencies go far beyond the cybercrime technology. So it stops being cyber technical problem. It becomes a policing problem, forensic problem, prosecution problem. So what I want you to get from my presentation, besides of my hideous accent. There is a major social difference between between crime and terror. Cybercrime is a cyber terror, because which is for cybercrime it is acceptable that something happens and then the prosecutors, the police come and look for the perpetrator. It is okay. It is mostly crime against property. Somebody's Bitcoin gets stolen, somebody's account gets emptied in a bank. But for the terror, for the cyber terror, the society wants the LEOs, the law enforcement, the white hats, to intercept the perpetrator before he does his thing. It is the most important distinction. We are as the Western civilization do not agree to, okay, so let the terrorist attack and then we catch him. No, it doesn't work like that. Everybody loses their mind. The same with cyber warfare. Here in States, it is quite different because you guys never had a real war on your territory. But in Europe, we had a lot of wars, and we want our governments to defend us before a war breaks out. Again, it is like with cybercrime. We want the law enforcement, the special services. We want the state apparatus to intercept the danger. and mitigate the threat. And that's all. There are 2 QR codes. The bigger one is our article. The smaller one is my contact data. Any questions? No questions. Great.
All right. Any questions? Jesse.
So I'm interested in why you said that there has been no, certainly widely publicized for sure, but no cyber terrorist attack, I guess, against social orders, though you did say that there has been obviously of cybercrime and cyber warfare. But then why do you say that there's not been an attack against social orders? Because I would say that these are probably relatively common, but they're small enough that most of us don't see them, or they're dealt with in a different place or space than we normally see.
There was, I said there were attacks that were equivalent of terrorist graffiti, which of course is some kind of attack against social order, but there were no attacks. Think of IRA. There were no such cyber terrorist attacks like the IRA bombing or 9/11 or something like that. There was. That's why I say this.
Just one added comment to what has been said. And to some prospect, and if you take attack against social order, and using your definition, you can make the point that actually the Russian campaign against democracy in the US and also Eastern Europe or Western Europe is part of a very goal is actually to attack social order. So in a way, if you frame that as the objective of cyber terrorism, using cyber means, then why shouldn't that be actually? And it's been proved to be very effective actually.
Okay, I thought about this argument. I don't call it cyber terrorism because it is directly state-sponsored. It is cyber warfare. A terrorist, like when I say terrorist, I say somebody like IRA or Hamas or somebody like that who is not working for under control of some state apparatus.
It's a bit unlawful in a way, because they're masking.
Sorry,
they're masking the trails. You know, it's you have a law of armed conflicts, where you should actually your combatants, sorry for the accents, should actually prove themselves to belong to some state, and actually you're an unlawful combatant when you actually mask your trails and hide all in signs, showing that you belong to some armies, and that's a bit what it seems to have happened.
It happens, and it is what I call hybrid warfare. It is warfare, but not official warfare.
Last question. Would you classify cyber warfare as the Russian cyber attacks against Crimea during the annexation where they attacked the infrastructure?
Can you speak louder?
So when Russia annexed portions of Crimea and launched cyber attacks against the critical infrastructure and the banking.
Yes, this is hybrid warfare.
Cyber warfare, okay.
That's a question for Gadi, too. Okay. Any other? That's it. Thank you very much. One of the questions that I threw out in the Slack channel, which I actually would think Paul's going to probably answer, is do we need full attribution before we do any takedown? Large-scale takedown.
That's a good question. I don't think so.
You don't think so? Well, we'll see
if we know what to take down, we should take it down.